Alright guys, so I thought I would do a video going into the what I'd call the science or force feedback, right? So I've been trying to get the FFB and RFactor to work correctly for, it must be about 6 to 8 weeks now. And I finally got there with a few of the cars. Like the BTCC cars was my main focus because I'm using this as a BTCC simulator, if you like. And I've got the GTEs and GT3s, LMPs kind of to a good level. Some of the cars in the game are just absolute crap, to be honest. But the DLC, the new stuff, is quite decent. But we can definitely see in some of the older models that quality of life care doesn't seem to be across the board the way we would like to see it. Aside from that, some of the issues I was having with the force feedback just didn't make sense to me, right? So we had issues with what felt like unreasonable amounts of jolt. I had to edit the JSON file and make some changes to the Fanatec FFB as well. So what I'm going to do, I've loaded up a base DD2 profile in RFactor 2, and I've also got Fanalab running. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set Fanalab to the recommended FFB settings for RFactor 2. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm gonna leave it as it is, and yeah, with these BTC settings. Actually, I'll go with the recommended settings. I'll go with the recommended settings just to, to keep things equal. So I've loaded on the recommended settings. So 45% overall FFB strength. The feedback scaling is set to linear. I'm just going to change that to peak, right? Because what peak does, it opens up the dynamic range of the wheelbase, right? Which is the whole point of having a direct drive in the first place, is that, feel what you're supposed to feel. Now, it's the supposed to feel piece is what we're going to see where the problem lies. And to do this, I'm going to do 2 quick laps on this base setting. And then I'm going to do 2 laps on my edited settings. And we're going to see the difference, not just in the driving, but we're also then going to jump into Motec to actually see how the data is interpolated, how it's extrapolated out of the system as well, and just exactly what the steering torque is on the car versus the FFB signal output on the wheelbase. So before we get talk any further, let's just get on with driving. And I'm going to turn on the log for this as well.
Logging enabled.
So what we're going to do is we're going to log 2 laps each, and already the steering wheel just pulling out of the garage. And this is a front wheel drive car with the limited slip diff, right? So the front of this is going to be very, very sharp, I think, very difficult to control. It's going to be a bit of a workout. But let us figure out what the pit limiter is first. Alright, so I've gone back into the garage, set the control assignment, because again, this is a default profile just to test out what the out-of-box FFB is like. So let's get into it, and we'll do 2 quick laps. And the feedback, the weight of the steering already is too much, far too much. So the wheelbase is at 45%, so the DD2 is going to kick out around, like, what's a 25 Newton meters peak, so we're at, like, what are we, 45%, so say half of that, roughly, so we're at about 12, 13 Newton meters. Now, more importantly, all I'm feeling is in the corners, right, when the car loads up, all I'm feeling is a constant torque. I'm not feeling any detail, and we're going to see in a few minutes why that might be. So what I'm going to do is just 2 quick laps, well, an out lap and a fast lap with both settings, both profiles. And I have to say that there's a lot of force to get the car turned, and then when the car is in the corner, it's pretty much a constant force. I don't really feel much differentiation between, the little undulations and the tire slipping across the surface. In fact, it's almost dull, I'll have to put a bit of force in to turn this, and to be honest with you, I'm afraid to bump the curves too much, because I know with this setting the feedback is just completely nuts. Let's do a little bit of a push lap, and again, it probably won't be crazily pushed, because this is like driving a car with very, very stiff, put it that way. And worth mentioning that this has the default controller profile JSON for the DD2, so there's been no edits to the jolt and the rumble strip magnitude, which is going to become important in the second test. But so far, this just feels very heavy, it feels dull. I mean, yeah, there's a bit of kick in the steering as I hit curves and stuff like that. The steering wheel, you can see there, it's wandering around a little bit, but I'm not getting much detail, to be fair. Once I load up the car into corners, I get no detail. And, oh, we're not turning at all here. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll finish this lap off at least. Yeah, I'll finish this lap off, but again, can't really feel much in the corners, like I say. And we'll see in Motec exactly why that might be in a few minutes. Again, very, very heavy steering. And turn. Holy shit. That's a workout. And cross the line just to get... Right, so I'm just going to go through and we'll get that log saved.
Log building finished.
Right, so that's that log saved, right. Now, to get rid of the drive-through that I have to serve, let us just restart that weekend session. And now let us look at some of the changes we're going to make. So on the default out of the box, let's say, you'll notice the car specific multiplier and the FFB strength is both at 100. Now let me change that profile to this edited one that I use, and let's load that up. And you'll see now the FFB strength has gone to 50%. Now, why I do that is because the signal out of RFactor 2 clips out of the box, basically. Now, at the same time as now that's being loaded in, right, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to load my Fanatec profile for the Ford Focus. And what this does, actually, I'm going to be running higher overall wheelbase strength, so we're going up from 45 to 52, 53%. But before we do that, let's have a quick look at Motec from that run that we just done there. And to do that, let me just share my other screen, basically, with share my top screen so that now is visible. Just make sure that everyone's seeing that, which, yep, you'll also be seeing that now. So let's pull up that lap that we done. So there is the Croft lap that we just done there. So let's open that up and see what's going on. Now, what I'm looking for is the forces, and we are going, whoops, where are we? We're looking at this, yeah, so we're looking at the, essentially the FFB output and the shaft torque. So what torque basically is coming from the steering rack itself. So here is the actual lap that we done. And you can see that the FFB output, let me just find a corner on the track. So maybe here we are going into, let's take turn 1, might be a good example. So let's just zone in on turn 1 and part of turn 2. So you'll see here where the blue line is that the FFB output, as we can see here, is hitting 100%. Okay, so what that means is, right, that's not the FFB of the well, I mean, it is the FFB of the wheelbase, but basically the game is telling itself that in this situation with this amount of torque applied to the wheel or the steering shaft give 100% of the FFB output. And you can see here throughout the whole of turn 1, which, you know, coming into turn 1, right way through turn 1, the signal clips about about 12 times roughly is what the signal clips. What we would like to see is the signal to more uniformly follow the red trace. The red trace is the actual steering shaft torque. Now ignore the figure in Newton, 51 Newton. Sorry, that's, I don't know where they're measuring that from. The actual Newton meters is not important, right? What we want to see is the actual trace following the red, basically. So we want that blue FFB output to be closer and more uniformed into the red, basically. So the shaft torque and the FFB, we want that to pull down to better follow that trace. But again, you can see here, as we go through the back section of the track again, there's more clipping on the signal. And then when we go out here, there's major clipping then as we come down towards that almost Tarzan swing at the back section. And then when we go into it then, you can see it just clips consistently. So when the signal is clipping like this, we're not going to get much information. And this does be even worse, guys, when you start to hit curves and stuff like that. So what we'll do is we'll leave that there. And let me just minimize this down. So here is now the, this was the default. So whoops, I hadn't loaded that. So the default was the 45 overall FFB strength. I just changed that from linear to peak because I want to use the entire dynamic range. What I'm doing now is, because I'm in the focus, I'm actually increasing the FFB strength on the wheelbase. It's still staying at peak. There's only tiny adjustments down to the natural damper, and this one here, the force effect intensity, is down to 80, right? Because this will smoothen out the impact on the wheelbase itself. And plus I have a little LED profile. So let's go ahead and load that onto the wheelbase. So that's now the profile that we're going to follow. In addition to that, as you've seen from the game, I've also loaded up my new, well, not my new, but my other profile for fixing this problem, basically, which brings the FFB strength down to 50%. Now, I've noticed in my testing that the actual wheelbase torque, with the setting that we currently have, floats around between 8 to 12 Newton meters, in around that. But more importantly, we don't really get clipping. But let's have a look at a lap. And let me just double check that's loaded. Let's have a look at a lap. Let's do a lap the same way we did a minute ago, and actually look at the results. And let me just adjust the seat slightly. Just to see a tiny bit. Right, so the steering wheel is a bit more sensible. It's not as tough to, let's say, rotate and stuff like that. And yeah, the marshal's waving us out, so all good. So let's go for a couple of laps and talk about what we can see. So immediately now, what I'm feeling is way more dynamic. I'm feeling way more changes. The steering wheel is not loaded up to pieces, and I'm actually able to get information back from the car, which is more important than anything, I guess, right? The actual strength of the force feedback is much more manageable, so I'm driving the car's not driving me. I'm just gone a little bit deep there. Let's just grass grip is quite bad, but as you'd expect. But more importantly, let's just do the out lap and a fast lap. Just get these tires up to temperature so it starts actually producing lateral forces, and from that then we'll be able to see the impact that it actually has on the force feedback trace. Because ultimately, when we are, I suppose when we're talking about sim racing in general, right, a lot of it is down to feel, what someone thinks is real, what somebody thinks is the right setting and stuff like that. So what I've tried to do here is take all that out of it and so, okay, well, what do I think? forget about what I think. Let's see what the data actually suggests. And yeah, you can see there I'm able to actually put a bit of lock onto the car without, you know, going too crazy. Now I'm purposely not going to over push these laps because I actually want to complete a lap to show the difference. So getting the data is more important than lap time here, right? So I'm not going to go too crazy. But already I can feel way more detail. Just that dynamic range has been opened back up and the wheelbase is actually doing what it's supposed to do, so really happy with that. And this is the thing as well about, like, you know, force feedback, like not being set too strong as well. Because just as a direct drive wheelbase motor can clip the signal going out by being oversaturated, the actual signal going into it can be saturated as well, as we have kind of seen. This corner always catches me out. It's not going to be too important anyway, and I suppose actually because we went off on the other run on that corner as well, so everything is going to be pretty much equal. And what we'll do is once we cross the finish line, we'll jump straight back into Motec with this data run and see how it looks different. But as you can see from how I'm driving the car, like, there's no real difference. Like, everything is, you know, everything is the same. So let's cross the finish line and get this into Motec. Right, so that was an outlap and a warm-up lap, or sorry, an outlap and a hot lap.
Log building finished.
Right, so the log now is finished. Alrighty, so let us go back to the top screen again and let us bring up Motec. So this is the original run. Let me just reset that. So that was the lap of 150.59. And now we have the second lap in the bag, which was, well, shown as 129, whatever. It's the actual, yeah. So, there's the original, and let us just take the first sector there, up the top. Let's just take the first couple of corners, where the clipping seems to be quite prevalent, right? So this is the original, and now let us overlay, or remove the original, and show the fixed. Again, same three corners. And look at how the trace now is following the steering torque almost 1-to-1. So what does that mean? Well, forget about the force feedback from the steering wheel for a second, right? That can be anything. That could be 10% force feedback output, it could be 100%, whatever you want. What we have here is the output from the game to the USB port is now matched to the steering shaft torque. The force feedback is now an exact match, and even if we go that bit, let's say, more granular, we can see that the steering shaft torque being a bit smoother compared to the FFB. Now that could be just down to the sample rate, which they are, I believe, I'm capturing them both at about 100 Hz, I believe. Yeah, so that's being logged at 100 Hz is the shaft torque, and I believe the FFB is being captured at the same. Let me just double check that. Oh, that's being captured at 400 Hz. Okay, so that explains why there's more, let's say, detail in the FFB, which is fine, right? Most important thing, biggest takeaway from this is that this is the let's say the fixed way. And again, let's just take the first couple corners, and this is the way then where we had severe clipping. I mean, look at the difference. Just look at the difference. So this lower green part down at the bottom, down near this 95-100%, so just where my cursor is now, this is the FFB output, and you should compare that with the blue line up here on the original trace. So that's what you're comparing. Let's look at this corner alone in isolation. So you can see the higher green trace up here, so the one that starts at 20. This is pretty much following the red trace from the other run that we done. as it should do. I mean, there's slight differences, right? But it's pretty much the same. And the reason it's the same is because that is the shaft torque output, right? It hasn't changed really from one run to the next, nor should it, because it's the same car on the same track. What has changed, though, is the blue line, the FFB output against the two runs. So if we look, let's say at this point here, so exactly 345 point whatever meters into the lap, the actual steering shaft torque. Actually, let us take one that overlaps pretty exact. Let's take this point here. So exactly 355 meters. We have steer and shaft torque of 49% on the second run that we done, and 51% on the first run that we done. So let's say the steer and shaft torque from the game is the same, give or take 2 Newton meters as measured, right? Wherever it's being measured from, that's not too important. The fact is, it's the same output pretty much. However, because we have reduced the gain from RFactor 2, it now thinks that, okay, well, I should only send half of the power or half of the output signal to move the wheelbase, either left or right, depending on how the driver interprets that. So on the original run, that was 100%. So the differences are massive. And you can see here in the red, a 2.15 Newton meter measurement torque difference has somehow equated into a 47% FFB strength output into the game. So what does all this mean? From my testing on most cars that I've tested so far, it appears that having the actual force feedback strength, and this is across the entire game, right? So I leave the car specific at 100. I don't want to mess with that too much. I just say, right, across the game, across the entire simulator, 50% FFB output seems to be the best match in order to make the output signal follow the steering rack torque, as you can see there. If we remove that and go back to the default as shipped with the game, and we just take a cross sample, you can see that in many areas it's way off, and then in areas such as this here, we actually have like severe clipping. As you can see, contrast that then with the second run we done. So the second run I'll bring up in green this time. You can see that both the torque and FFB output trace pretty much follow themselves, and there's some degree of uniformity there. Obviously there'll be slight differences because one lap is slightly different than the next, and but you get the point. How this looks over the entire lap, you can see. So let's take a cross section where there's no extremes. So this is where there's no steering load on the car, and you can see straight away that everything is pretty much car's happy. The FFB output is somewhat uniform. But again, that's just this is just how I've tested it. And if we go down to the Tarzan section down there, skip that forward by another meters, you can see here coming into the Tarzan section, around this point on both laps, the actual steering shaft torque, the red to the smoother green, is pretty much the same. But again, not to beat a dead horse, but the FFB output, like if you look at the original run, the FFB output is completely clipped from here to here. So the best part of coming out of a bend has been clipped. Now, in addition to this, and I'll share this file, I'll add it into the description as a downloadable link to a folder that I'll share. But let us pull up the JSON file. Alright, so here is the JSON. So, two things that you need to change to get, in my opinion, the force feedback correct, in addition to the Fanatec settings that I will also share in this folder. But basically, when you go down to rumble strip effect magnitude, that I think is 0 out of the box. If it isn't, set it to 0. The magnitude, and then the pull factor, I have is 0.1. And in my testing, what this appeared to do is when you hit a rumble strip or a curb, the steering wheel has a tendency to kind of pull left and right, sometimes in an unrealistic manner. So what I've done is I've put that down to a very low value of 0.1. And then what we've done as well was the jolt setting. So let us search for jolt on the controller file. Where is jolt? It must be up the top then. So jolt magnitude 0.7. I recommend anywhere from 0.3 to 0.7 or thereabout. And yeah, I would just play with that. And what the jolt is, in my experience, is when you crash, or even when you hit a real high curb that sometimes will spike the force feedback and it'll want to take the wheel out of your hand completely. By editing that jolt thing, it really does make a difference. My Fanatec settings then for the car I've just driven this time around, here they are. So the overall FFB 52%. It's on the peak setting, so the full power of the wheelbase is available based on 52% of the output. Natural damper 15, friction and inertia 5 and 3. The interpolation filter is at 4, and the force effect intensity is at 80. So the force effect intensity, what that does is this acts as further smoothing those harsh curb interactions and FFB spikes and stuff like that. And it feels pretty good. And as I say, with these settings, with the combined JSON file and with the Fanatec settings that you see here, when I trace the Newton meter output on my wheelbase, because anyone with a DD1, DD2, you have a little LCD screen on the wheelbase that will track the torque output as you drive, basically. And in my testing, these settings give around maybe 8 to 12 Newton meters of force, depending. So 12 would be the peak if you hit a curb hard or you maybe have a strong correction moment. But generally speaking, for regular driving, you'll be in around the 8 to 10 mark, which, in my opinion, I'm using a Formula V2 wheel, by the way, so a smaller diameter wheel again, so the torque will be slightly higher as I feel it. But my testing, that seems to be the sweet spot. Hopefully, guys, this has helped a lot of you, and hopefully it's shone a light onto some of the RFactor 2 problems that a lot of people can sometimes have, particularly Fanatec users. I think the guys on SimiCube, you lads can download profiles from other stuff like that, I believe, where all of this stuff has been dealt with already and fixed for you, basically, and masked to some extent in the settings. But for any Fanatec users, we don't have the luxury, I guess, of downloading from within the software. We'd have to go onto forums, we'd have to pull it down. It's very subjective. There's JSON files floating around the place, and it just becomes a rabbit hole. But hopefully with this video, I've been able to put some facts and logic onto the topic of force feedback in RFactor 2. And this would apply to any game as well, by the way. Again, why I've chosen to go after RFactor 2 on this one is because out of the box, as a Fanatec user, the FFB is not good. And that's going to upset a lot of people, me saying that, but it's a fact, right? Out of the box, it's just not there, and we've seen it in the data. So this is not just my opinion, this is fact. But I fixed it, I think. For me at least, it's been fixed. So this is not a pop at RFactor 2. I actually love the simulation. It feels nice to me now that I've fixed it. This video is purely to help people that may be in the same situation that I've been in with this simulation and thought, what the hell is going on? The game's broken, the FFB is screwed, etc., etc. So hopefully this helps a lot of people. And just on the topic of driving this particular car for this particular test, definitely get on there and give the BTCC cars a shot. They're really, really fun once you get them dialed in, as I have here. What I'll do, guys, finally, I have a little folder that I've created in my OneDrive account that I use for sharing stuff with anyone that views the video and any followers and stuff like that. So what I will do is I will update a README text file with my Fanatec settings, and I'll also copy the controller file that I've used this for this test, and hopefully, just paste it into your own controller user file or user folder within RFactor 2. The only thing you may have to change is your pedals, and because I'm using Heusinkveld sprints, you're probably not. You might be using a different set of pedals, so you'll just have to assign the throttle, clutch, and brake on your set. But yeah, we'll leave it there, guys. I know this may have been a bit more of a boring video than the usual exciting car reviews and stuff that I go driving, and a bit of a break from the norm, but at the same time I think it was important I've done this, and hopefully it helps a couple of people. We'll leave it there, guys. Thanks for watching, and yeah, happy driving and happy FFB.